Hello, BookTube. I have some mail to start off the week. I have some Monday mail. I have 2 boxes. One is little and one is very big. And I know what the very big one is, but the little one I have no idea. So let's go through that. The little one is from a publisher. The big one is not. The big one is from Review. Oh, look at this. Oh, the bean is right here and ready. Do you want some cardboard, baby bean? Hmm? Oh, you do. Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness gracious. Now, are you going to be able to get that through? Or do you want me to do that for you? There you go. There's a narrow passageway between the bed and the electronic space heater that I badly need. I am freezing cold as I make this video because I had to turn it off because it's a little loud. And I'm suffering here at the very end of effing April. I'm suffering because it's freezing cold and pouring sleet and dark as twilight, and it has been for the last 10 years. So that thing is going all the time. And there's only a narrow way, and I thought better to throw. She has a little blanket on the floor over there. That's where she'll destroy that thing. But anyway, let's see what we have here. This is from the University of Nebraska Press, wonderful university press that does lots of unconventional stuff. And this is Out of the Crazy Woods by Cheryl Savageau. Let's see here. You probably want to look at her, don't you? I wonder if I can get this up high enough so I can see. Here she is. And destroying that on her little blanket. I'll have to pick up the pieces, of course. She doesn't pick up after herself. Dogs never do. They make an enormous mess, and then when you say, what about this mess? They look at you and say, no opposable thumbs. Sorry. So anyway, this is a riveting and insightful story of Abenaki poet Cheryl Savageau and her late life diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Without sensationalizing, she takes the reader inside the experience of a rapid cycling variant of the disorder. Rapid cycling variant of bipolar disorder. That sounds terrible. Providing a lens through which to understand it and a roadmap for navigating the illness. The structure of her story, impressionistic, fragmented, is an embodiment of the bipolar experience and a way of perceiving the world. This book takes the reader into the euphoria of mania, as well as to its ugly, agitated rage, and into the lying down of desire that is depression. Oh my. Oh my. Okay, well it sounds like brutal reading. I mean, important reading, but brutal. Good Lord. Okay, well, so the date on this is May the 1st. But I don't know if that's true. As always, that will be I don't get many new books in the mail anymore, but my worry here, my admonition to you will be definitely check if this is of interest to you. It sounds really interesting. Tough. What an incredible effort of bravery on the author's part to write this. But if it interests you, you should definitely check the publication date, because publishers are pushing that dates like crazy for new books. And really, can you blame them? On one level, it would be insane to bring out a new, what is this, $30? $30. A new $30 hardcover on the 1st of May in America. There are no bookstores that are open or are going to be open for anytime soon. There's nobody out. So it'd be kind of crazy to do this. I'm kind of curious to know if the publisher can send a copy to me, then maybe Amazon can send a copy to you, or the University of Nebraska Press. I don't know what the shipping protocols are for any of these places, but getting it in the mail will be the only way. If this comes out on the 1st of May, you won't see it stacked in bookstores because you won't be in bookstores, and they won't be receiving it. So maybe the publisher pushed it back a little. I have no idea. I tend to doubt it. If I'm getting a finished copy, I tend to doubt it, but you never know. Double check with everything new that we get, if we get anything new. But the next thing is an enormous box. And I know who sent this, although I thought this person was sending it media mail, because it's generous enough as it is without paying priority mail, but no. I know I always say, don't send me a book. On this channel, that is an absolute mantra. Don't send me a book. No matter how much you want me to have it, don't send it to me. Don't send me a book. And that is true. That is absolutely true. There's one way around it. There's 2 ways around it. There are 3 people who are watching this channel who have known me for a very long time and can guess something that I've never mentioned, something that they've never heard of, they can guess whether or not I'm going to want it. They might not be able to guess whether or not I have it, but they can guess whether or not I'm going to want it. They can guess whether or not it'll bring a smile to my face or be a complete waste of time. But the other way to get around it is to ask me. I mean, actually, there are two other ways to get around, but one of them isn't functional anymore. I guess online it is. You could give me a gift certificate. People don't like to do that. But back when the Brattle Bookshop in Boston here, for instance, was open, I would tell people all the time, if you want to get me a book, then just fund me at the Brattle, because then I will be sure to get what I want. But if you get me a book, if you send me something, it'll be something I have 10 copies of, something I read and didn't like, something I have no interest in reading. Invariably, almost invariably, it will be that. And that route of calling the Brattle was one route. It's not open right now to do that. But another route is to simply ask me, here is a book that I want to send you. Do you want it? I won't send it if you don't want it. That takes all the mysticism out of it, but when you have as many books as I do, you can't afford mysticism. And one of you, who wishes to remain anonymous, actually contacted me and said, I am getting rid of these books. If you want them, I will send them to you. And I did. So that person sent them. And now we get to look at them. Oh my, will you look at this? Good Lord, it's just an entire box full of books. All right. Hi, baby. Oh, hi, baby bean. All right. I'm not going to give you this box, Frida. This box is bigger than you are. I should put you in this box. That's what I should do. No, you're not. No. You have a box already on the floor, right? It's right over there. I threw it for you. No, baby. Oh, here. Let's show you to your fans. Maybe that'll calm you down. Oh. Oh. You don't need another box. I already gave you a box. You barely made a dent in it. I know, it's new, but you can't have it just because it's new. You can tear apart your other box. All right, we have, let's see here, 5 books to go through. All of them, I think, you have seen on this channel. And that is part of the reason why I was so happy with the list, because I've gotten rid of almost all of them to you over the years. So these are all active parts, active additions to my collection, things that I was just counting on finding again at the Brattle or wherever. Now I don't need to. The first one is one of the best volumes of the New York Review of Books. The New York Review of Books makes reprints of certain classics and whatnot, and it's amazing to me. They've done hundreds and hundreds of them. Barely any of them appeal to me. I wholeheartedly applaud their endeavor. I wholeheartedly applaud that idea. It's an incredibly vigorous reprint line that has lots of fans, but virtually nothing that they reprint is of any interest to me. But they announced a few years ago a reprint that was of great interest to me for personal and professional reasons. And it's this, the collected essays of Elizabeth Hardwick. So this is not just Bartleby and Manhattan, but a lot of other things as well. It is not the complete essays. And that bugged me, because I figure if you're the New York Review of Books, where she was the heart and soul, and if you're doing a whole big volume of the essays of Elizabeth Hardwick, why not go the extra mile and make it everything? But it's close enough. It's closer than any one volume has ever been before. And I showed this on this channel when I was doing my tour of books about books and collections of reviews. And one of you wrote to me and said, I know that this is in the little book room, so my chances are very low, but if I would love that book, if you could send it to me, and I don't have the funds to get it myself. And I did, because I thought, okay, well, it's available at the New York Review of Books if you really want a copy, and you have all the individual essays anyway. So, heresy of heresies to send something out from this room, but nevertheless, it seemed like the generous thing to do, so I did. I figured even if none of those things work, the Brattle will provide. Never did I guess that the Brattle and everything else would be closed. So that spot has just been empty, and now it's full again. Now I have this collection again. Elizabeth Hardwick wrote long critical essays for the New York Review of Books and a couple of other places, and they are unbelievably good. I cannot praise them highly enough. They are unbelievably good. She is an excellent example. She would hate to hear me say it. She would have hated to hear me say it. May even have hated to hear me say it. But she's an excellent example, in my mind, of an author who should have written only nonfiction and not any fiction. Fiction is good, but it's nowhere near as good as her nonfiction. Then this next one, I'm not sure that we may not have seen this on this channel. It's brilliant. It's an absolutely brilliant book. It was a huge phenomenon in Germany. So much so that I heard about it long before it had an English language translation and got a copy from Germany and read it. I've read everything else on the subject, and it's World War II, and I couldn't wait for it to come out in an English translation just so that I could recommend it to people who only read English, so that I could have a second copy and whatnot. But it turns out it wasn't even a second copy, because I got rid of that German copy somewhere along the line, to a used bookstore or the Brattle or a friend. I got rid of it, so I didn't have this book at all, and now I do. This is Jörg Friedrich, and this is The Fire, and this is about the bombing of Germany by the Allies. This is the English language American. This is Columbia University Press. I'm going to have an enormous amount of enjoyment reading this again. I haven't read it in years, and this is just fantastic for this to be back in my collection now. Look at that. There you go. This book very directly looks at the subject, which is very uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable that most people who read, most Westerners in the UK and the US who read about World War II in school will never know anything about this subject or the horrifying extent of this subject, because this wasn't, despite what this author sometimes swipes at saying, and despite what other critics have said, this was obviously retributive bombing. This was obviously not just tactical. It was designed to inflict cruelty on civilian populations. It was designed for psychological revenge, as much as it was for any other thing. And this is a searching, incredibly intelligent examination of that whole campaign. It's going to be such a thrill to read it again. And it is a keeper. I knew that when I got it originally. I don't think I ever personally owned a copy of the English translation. I think I got it out of the library once it had an English translation. When was this English translation? This was De Brand was in Germany in 2002, and this translation was 2006. And I don't think that 2006 would have been right before I got back into the reviewing world. So I don't think I got a copy. I think I got it out of the library when I knew it was in English. But I don't think I've ever owned the English language, and I don't have the German anymore. So this is going to go in my permanent World War II collection. It is an absolute classic on the subject. And then we have, when I see this thing, I almost want to open it for a pub sheet, because we saw this on this channel. This is by William Watkins, and it is Crossroads for Liberty, Recovering the Anti-Federalist Values of America's First Constitution. This is a great, if polemic, book on the Articles of Confederation, which a lot of people who don't study American history, and a lot of Americans who don't know their history, will not know was the first Constitution. It was the first organizing national document. And it had notorious flaws when you read about it, even on Wikipedia. I'm sure Wikipedia leads with its notorious flaws, as if any other document in the history of humankind was perfect when it was made. Of course, the Articles of Confederation would have been fiddled with and fixed and strengthened. But the reason why the subtitle mentions anti-federalists is because the Articles of Confederation were deeply suspicious of centralized federal power. Rightly so. Very much rightly so. Not to get all topical on you, but look at this pandemic in American society right now. Imagine how much worse every aspect of this situation would be if the federal government, under the leadership of Donald Trump, had all the power. Imagine how much worse it would be. Millions of people would be dead. Instead, because America retains elements of federalism, because it retains elements of anti-federalism, because the states have a great deal of power arrogated to them alone and not to the federal government, there's been at least a kind of patchwork response that has been responsible and human and empathetic and effective, when the federal government isn't there on the loading dock in North Carolina or New York or New Jersey stealing supplies for a hoard that I guess the president and his children think is their personal property. If that kind of thing, where the country is ruled by a person, or in the founders' absolute worst nightmare, a family, that was exactly what they were rebelling against, the idea that you have no control over this at all, that it's just someone marrying and having children, and the children will one day rule you. That the idea that this whole thing, the whole country, could be ruled by someone who is an ignoramus or a fascist or a racist or a rapist or a moron or a narcissist or whatever, and that all the power would rest with them, was horrifying to a great many of the founders. But they somehow managed to make their peace with that horror when it came time to arrogating that power into their own hands. And the Articles of Confederation, this book, very spiritedly defends not just their individual provisions, which weren't anywhere near as bad as their critics say they were, but also the idea that was at the heart of the Articles of Confederation, which is that federated power is bad and ought to be very suspiciously viewed and only very parsimoniously ever used. I read this. I got the advanced copy and I left it alone, and I got the finished copy and read it. But once again, I talked about this on my channel at some point or other, and once again, one of you heard my description and a rant probably very much like this one, and very much wanted this book, and I just sent it out. Just assuming that down the line I would get it somewhere, that Columbia would come out with a paperback and I would get that, or I'd be able to request it, or that a paperback or a hardcover would turn up at the Brattle. All kinds of this prodigal thinking that I had when books were raining out of the sky that I wouldn't do now. I would think twice now. I strike a hard note. If it were still defensible for me to go to the post office, it isn't. But if it were, I would probably mail this out again. I strike a hard note. But if one of you said, I really, really want that and I don't have access to it, I'd probably do that. But I don't. I can't. Now, going to the post office, despite what this person did, that's why this makes this so much more generous. I can't risk going to the post office just for mailing books to people. I'm going to have to wait until there's a little bit more of an all clear sounded, especially in Massachusetts, which is being hit pretty hard by this pandemic. But I have had, much like these other two, I've had a kind of a hole on my shelf where I knew this would end up being one day when I got another copy, and here it is. So that is wonderful. And this is all a result of careful advance warning. And then this next one is a classic. Once again, I want to look for a pub sheet because I first read this as an advance copy from the publisher, even though I don't think I was reviewing when this came out. Yeah, 2001. I got an advance copy from the publisher, but I wasn't reviewing at the time. So I had the copy, I had the pull sheet, but I didn't have any venue. In 2001, I wasn't even thinking about getting back into reviewing. Wasn't even thinking about it. So I read this and loved it. It is a brilliant work. And it's American Colonies by Alan Taylor. And it's great. An absolutely essential work. A study of colonial America that you just have to have. He's such a wonderful, clear thinker. And so smart that his one paragraph can lead you places that you don't expect. I just love it. A lot of times when writers write about this period, especially at this length, they will succumb to droning. And this author never does. Never. It's just wonderful. His very latest book I didn't particularly like. I reviewed it a little bit harshly, but not for any fault of his, except sympathy. He has sympathy sometimes with the wrong people. But this is brilliant. His masterpiece so far. And I don't have it. Again, I don't have it. I got rid of it either to an impetuous book sale, or to maybe somebody I was working at a bookstore at the time it came out. Maybe somebody at the bookstore was really into the colonial American period, and I said, oh, let me bring you in a bag of books, and I just threw this in with it. One way or another, I definitely did not have it. And the same thing with this last one. This last one is aside from The Fire, this is the best book in this batch. Something that I have gone back to and consulted many, many times since it came out. A brilliant new work. That is also on the American Revolution, on the Revolutionary period, that I had as an advance copy, and I got rid of the advance copy. I had the finished copy. I got rid of the finished copy. I had a big, beautiful trade paperback that the publisher sent me. I got rid of that as well. So, and in every one of those cases, I was getting rid of it to either a book sale or to someone who really wanted it. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, they want it and they don't have access to a used bookstore like the Brattle. They don't have access to publishers. And you do. So, box it up and send it to them. And the next time it crosses your radar, either in the endless stream of books at the Brattle or from a publisher, you can just request it again. You'll be able to get it much easier than the recipient. So just do it. And that turned out not to be true because, once again, the world came to a stop. I'm hoping that stop isn't permanent, but nevertheless. And it's this. It's Michael Klarman. It's The Framers' Coup. Which is all about the Constitution, the Constitutional Convention, the making of the Constitution, the supplanting of the Articles of Confederation, and what that meant. the instituting, you should see it's a massive book. It's so good, just so good. What it meant for the framers, for the founders, to create a document that created a federal government, an incredibly strong federal government, a federal government with enormous coercive powers over the individual states. And the reason why it's called a coup is the same reason why those same founding fathers had to keep secret that they were going to do that. It was well known up and down the length of the colonies that the cream of the crop, the pick of the litter, the best intellectuals and statesmen and soldiers were going to get together and revise the Articles of Confederation. That was well known. That was covered in all the newspapers. But nobody knew that the founders intended from the beginning to throw the whole thing out and write a new document, a constitution. And nobody guessed what that constitution... There were old-style firebrands in the revolutionary movement who were horrified at the idea that started to come out in this new constitution, which is an incredibly strong federal government, a thing that ought not to exist at all in its current form, a thing that is purely evil. And today, oh God, the founders, as much as they were leery of it back then, they couldn't have imagined how bad it would get today. How bad it would get today. That a president of the United States could use the power of the federal government, and as it's invested in his office, to conduct a bombing war on a country without anyone knowing. to conduct his own private war on a country for years without the American people knowing. A nightmare of federalism. A nightmare of the federal government. And it's just that bad all over. The federal government has unbelievable coercive power over you. And yet, who lives in the federal government? It's not a place, it's an idea. No one lives there. People live in Idaho, they live in Illinois, they live in Milwaukee. They don't live in the federal government. And yet it siphons an enormous amount of money out of the people of the United States to keep itself going, to guard its own flanks. An enormous amount of the money that you earn in your state, for your state, is siphoned either directly out of you or siphoned out of your state to the federal government, in exchange for the kind of heavy stick bribery that a big thuggish central government will always be able to do, even if they don't need soldiers to do it. So if you're a rural Idaho district and your governor knows he needs a road there, well, he knows he needs to kowtow to the federal government to get that money, and so on and so forth. I'm not gonna make a federalism rant, but nevertheless, this is a great book. Just a great book on the subject, and on a lot of subjects all around there, and fantastic character drawing too. Oh my. And I didn't have a copy. The minute I saw it on this person's list, the list that I got in an email, I realized, oh my God, these are all bullseyes. So we have The Framers' Coup, we have American Colonies, we have Crossroads for Liberty, we have The Fire in an English translation, and we have the collected essays of Elizabeth Hardwick, all in the mail from one of you. And the reason why this worked so well is because the person let me know ahead of time. This is the simplest thing in the world. Now, I'm not telling any of the rest of you to do that. I think I made initially a fairly stern note to the person who sent these books, that now is not the time to be going to a post office and mailing books. And the person who sent these assured me that the rural post office that we were talking about had very few people and was completely safe to do. Okay, all right, fine. But I'm certainly not implying that any of the rest of you should do that too. But if there's a book that you think I might want, I know the element of surprise is nice and Christmas morning fun, but it will lead to disaster if you indulge in it. Instead, just tell me. Do what this person did. Just write me an email and say, I've got these books. Do you want them? Doesn't have to be now. You can just make a mental note to set them aside for when we're all able to move freely around the cabin again. But anyway, in the meantime, how happy. What an amazing thing. What an amazing thing to have all these. This is absolutely great. A couple of these will probably commandeer my reading time over the next 12, 15, 20 hours, when it maybe shouldn't, when there may be new books that I should be, but I don't think I'm going to be able to resist, so I think a couple of these probably will. But anyway, that is it. Mail. Monday mail. Let's see if Tuesday has any mail. We'll see. I'll be back then, and we'll find out together. Thank you, BookTube.